debate about the referendum in Sudan. We are joined from London by Ayu Johnson, the editor of Viewpoint Africa, and also joined from Washington, D.C. by Jennifer Cooke, who is the director of the Africa program at Center for Strategic and International Studies. And here from Beijing, we have Ms. Wenping, director of African Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Madam He, I really want to begin this from you because I recently got a quote of a Chinese diplomat talking about China's hope on the referendum. He said, hope it can be done in a just, free, transparent, and peaceful way. From what we know, is that likely to be the case?
Yes. From all those informations we have collected so far, so it's very likely that South will declare a succession from the North. So because in the South, the people there, they have long waited for this moment. And historically speaking, there's a long mistrust between the people in the South and the people in the North. Mm-hmm. And also, I think they thought they are different people from the culturally speaking or religion speaking, so that they simply think they are different. They should be another country.
But Mr. Johnson, I heard there are already 5 lives lost so far since the poll opened.
Yes, it's sad, but it wasn't expected. It would appear that in the Dinka region, tribesmen were at loggerheads with one another, but nonetheless, it shouldn't take away from the fact that it's a historic day. It's a fantastic movement for the Sudanese people, especially that of the South, who fought a protracted period of war over many decades, and countless lives have been lost, not to mention the millions that have been displaced. So for them, it's an independence. It's to show that they are capable of running their own affairs, and more so, it's to show to the international world that they're ready to take control of New Sudan. It would appear so.
What is important is not only the day of the voting, but also the days after. Ms. Cooke, how do you see the final result, for example, as some have predicted separation? If that is the case, will that mean peace or not at all between the North and South, even if there is a referendum?
Yeah, I don't want to take away from what an important moment this is for Sudan. But the referendum, it's 1 week of voting. Very likely the South will vote for secession. And I think it's then that really the hard work begins, because many of the things that should have been agreed prior to this vote, for example, how will they divide the oil revenues? In some cases, where is the border between North and South? Who will take on Sudan's very heavy debt burden? What happens to southern citizens living in the North and Northerners living in the South? There's many issues that haven't yet been resolved. And so while this is just a very historic day, as the previous speaker said, it's very welcome that it's happening on time, for example, and I think many thought it would be delayed. It couldn't happen. It wouldn't happen peacefully. But really, it's after this referendum that a lot of the hard work begins.
Mr. Johnson, how do you see the possibilities as Ms. Cooke has mentioned earlier, all of these potential troubles and worrisome issues? How are they likely to decide the future of the two Sudan if the referendum is about separation?
Absolutely. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement in 2005 did not address all the issues surrounding land, the borders, very much the share of oil in the Upper region, and it would appear that moving forward it's very much a blueprint by which the Sudanese people need to build up on. But I think the consensus here and the issues are very much how the rest of the world, the international world, responds. If it's to be the case that South Sudan were to go their way and the results were to be in favor of that, the question then lies, how are they going to, what's the level of support they're going to have, because clearly South Sudan doesn't have good infrastructure. It's very much an impoverished environment. Large numbers of people live on less than $1 a day. So yes, the international community has a consensus and an opportunity to help South Sudan develop and evolve. And China, being a member of the Security Council, and the influence that they have not only on the African continent but very much in Sudan, would have to play a pivotal role, I would say.
How big a role will China, for example, Ms. He, play in this regard when Sudanese themselves do not have a plan yet?
I think China has heavily involved in the economic development in Sudan as a whole, not only especially in recent years, not only in the focus in North Sudan, and also those kind of economic cooperation has been expanded to the south as well. For example, a lot of Chinese companies has already been there and helped the local to dig the well and also build the house and build infrastructure. So I think China now has been maintaining good relations with both North and South.
But how will China help? As our friend Mr. Johnson said, the North and South do not yet have a plan on some of the very important issues, the political side, the economic side, the oil and the resources. What role can China really play, do you think?
I think we have appointed a special envoy about Sudan issue, our Ambassador Liu, and he has personally has been heavily engaged with a lot of talking about how to implement the CEPA, this comprehensive peace agreement. And also we also encourage both sides, North and South, really sit down and have a talk and discussion about all those thorny issues. But frankly speaking, all those issues are really quite hard to make a consensus during such a short time. So that's why, because in order to make this referendum been taken place on time, so all those thorny issues now have to be postponed to the following 6 months transitional period. So I think Chinese government will continue to do that to encourage both to sit down to talk and maintain the peace and fair and transparent referendum at first.
Well, Ms. He is talking about China's perspective. Ms. Cooke, I want to hear about the American perspective. The best scenario everybody would love to have. However, we should also prepare for the worst scenario. U.S. perspective, please.
Yeah, I think the U.S. has, in the past year, really set on a course of offering incentives to both sides, and particularly to Khartoum, to make sure that this referendum is peaceful and to assuage perhaps some of the North's fears about what separation will mean. After all, the North will be losing a great deal of its revenues, much of its population and land and so forth. And one of the concerns is that does that loss perhaps make Khartoum less willing to open up to groups within northern Sudan? Does it make it less willing to compromise on some of the issues that are still outstanding with the South? So the United States, I think, has gone very much from an approach of kind of punitive measures and isolation and sanctions to offering kind of a way out for Sudan, for northern Sudan, and offering some incentives in terms of normalization of diplomatic relations, perhaps some help on debt relief and so forth.
All right.
The problem is, however, that...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The problem is that Darfur is still outstanding, and that is such an issue for the U.S. Congress and for U.S. constituencies. And it will be very hard to normalize relationships with Khartoum with the Darfur conflict ongoing, or crisis
Is it fair, though, Mr. Johnson, that the Darfur issue will be in the way of the development, let's say, if the north and the southern side decided to be separated from one another for their further development and future development?
Yes, Darfur has been a sticky point for Bashir. It has daunted him. It has confused the entire scenario in Sudan to the extent that the International Criminal Court is now chasing Bashir and has put punitive issues around him to ensure that he's captured. But more so, it has meant that Bashir has ensured that his country has found itself on a watch list with the United States for terrorism, and very much a country that's not been receiving a lot of sanctions. So,
but at the same time, we see the president is actually striking a conciliatory note, saying he will be among the very first ones to congratulate the southern Sudanese if the result of the referendum is a yes.
So he must be complimented, and Bashir has been a pivotal role. He's played a pivotal role to get to where we are now, with the South Sudan likely to go its own way, and so he must be respected. He's shown great maturity, but he's a strategist, and he's realized that he's built the infrastructure in the north. He's made sure the pipeline run through the north, so in moving forward, the South and the North are intertwined. They can't live with one another, without one another. And very much so, he's trying to play to the international community to ensure that some of the pressures that he's currently receiving from the ICC and that from the United States and other Western powers are reduced, and it would mean that he'll be welcomed back into the international community.
From what you have already said, the three of you, we can see the complexity of the issue, and therefore, Ms. He, China said earlier that no matter what exactly will be the result of the referendum, China will keep good relations with both the North and the South. But it's quite a balance to be done.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of work has been done years ago. For example, in 2008, September, if my memory is correct, we have already set up a general consular office in Juba, that's the capital city of the South. And also a number of the high officials from the government of South Sudan have paid their visit to Beijing, to China. And also, as I mentioned before, a number of Chinese companies have already doing their business in South. So the good relations has been already established between Chinese government and South Sudan. And also the traditional good relation between China and North Sudan will be maintained, that's for sure, because a lot of Chinese investment has been there. Right. I think around more than 20,000 Chinese now living in Sudan as well.
All right. But Ms. Cooke and Ms. He, how much can really the international community help for a country? Right now, there has been some unrealistic expectations, as some describe in some media reports, saying people in the South were expecting that the roads can be done, the electricity can be done, infrastructure can be done overnight as long as they voted yes for the referendum. But we know that is not likely to be the case. So how much help can really the international community offer? Ms. Cooke first.
Yeah, I think we're going to be, the international community is going to need to help for a long time. As you say, the expectations are very high. This is a very fragile government in a way, some very smart people within the government, but it's not particularly deep in terms of capacities to do this. The other question is, with the stakes so high, the country is so poor, you have a massive influx of oil revenues. Will the SPLM government, the southern government, make sure that those revenues are used in a way that benefits all southern Sudanese? Or do we see kind of a concentration of revenues within Juba and really a competition over those and perhaps conflict within the South?
Right.
I think we need to push not only in terms of assistance, but also pressures on the government to ensure that that assistance is used in ways that really build a sustainable peace within southern Sudan.
Exactly. And Ms. He, very briefly, please, for the last question. China has always believed in non-interference policy when it comes to others' internal affairs. How do you think that can be balanced while China is offering help to the others, for example, to Sudan?
I think the very meaning of the non-interference policy of Chinese government, that is not to interfere the host countries' their own choice for their political development path and also their economic strategy. So I think that it's nothing to do with this case. Things, even though the South Sudan, they have not yet becoming a sovereignty state, but our contact with South Sudan has mainly through the party, like the Chinese Communist Party, and the South Sudan, the SLPM. So I think that's a different case.
All right. We wish good luck, of course, to the people in Sudan, whether they're in the north or in the south. Thank you very much, Wenping, Jennifer Cooke, and also Johnson.